Last weekend, as I was working on this blanket, my husband said, "Didn't you just start that like yesterday?" He was surprised to see how much it had grown in such a short time. Now, I wouldn't typically tell a beginner that a blanket is a great first project because normally they take a ton of time to finish. But if you're set on making a blanket, this is the best place for you to start. With a super bulky yarn and a really big hook, you can have this one finished in a week, only working an hour or so per day. The step-by-step tutorial is coming up. I chose Lion Brand Woolies Thick and Quick for this project because they really have a great color selection, but mostly because it's a super bulky yarn and it works up really fast when paired with a big hook. But if for some reason you can't find this yarn, you can substitute with another super bulky, that's a number 6 yarn if you prefer. You'll want to choose 2 different colors and get a 15mm crochet hook when you're at the store. This colorway is called Wheat, and it adds loads of great texture with these little rayon bits blended in, but I will say some of them have a tendency to jump out of the yarn and out of the project, but it's not too big of a deal. Okay, wrap the yarn around your fingers twice like this, then lay the back strand over the front, and grab that front strand and pull it up and over your finger, and that'll make a slip knot to get things started. All of your crochet projects, for the most part, are going to start with this technique. Now put your hook through the loop and tighten it up, and gather the yarn in your hands, and we'll make 75 chains. Now pay close attention to how I'm twisting my hook as I'm making these chains. To make this process easier, make sure your hook is pointed downward when trying to pull it through. Trust me, it'll be much easier that way. Alright, when you have 75 chains, it'll look something like this. So look at the chain from the front, kind of looks like a braid, right? Then flip it over and see all those little bumps on the back? Those little bumps are where we're going to work our stitches for the first row. So find the second bump from the hook and place your hook in there. Then yarn over and pull through the chain. Yarn over again and pull through both loops that are on your hook. That's one single crochet made. That's one of the most basic stitches in crochet, and you'll use it a ton as you continue with your crocheting journey. Now do it again for the next chain. And keep going until you have one single crochet in every chain. By the way, the best way to follow along with my tutorials is to have the pattern in front of you too. That'll show you even more information than you're picking up here in the tutorial, like the specific amount of yarn you need. Plus, it's a great way to start learning how to read a crochet pattern. So you can view the pattern for this project completely free on my website, or if you prefer to have a copy in hand to print or save for later, you can pick up the PDF from my shop. I'll have a link to both of those options in the description below, so you can do what works best for you. When you have a single crochet in every chain, it'll look something like this, and you should count 74 stitches total. To start the next row, make a chain and flip the work like you're turning the page of a book. It'll be a little more difficult because we've got a really long piece of work here, but do your best to flip it like you're turning the page of a book. And see this stitch here. Make a single crochet there. Then find the next stitch and single crochet there as well. And keep going. Now I want to be completely honest with you and say that you'll probably struggle a little bit with the edges of this blanket. As a brand new crocheter, it's not always easy to tell what stitch is your first stitch, or what stitch should be the first stitch, and what stitch is your last. That's totally normal if you experience that. Don't let that get you down. Everyone struggles with it. Just remember that at the beginning of the row, for this particular project, your first stitch is the one right next to the chain you made prior to turning. Now the last stitch of the row will probably look a little wonky. That's totally fine, completely normal. Just don't let that throw you off so you miss the stitch. Make sure you make a single crochet there as well. Then chain 1, turn your work, find that first stitch again, and single crochet there, and keep going just like the previous row. From here, you'll continue making one single crochet in every stitch for a total of 13 rows in this first color, color A. You can count your rows pretty easily by finding that clear line created by this stitch pattern. You won't always see this for other stitches, but for this one we see it really well. There are 2 rows between these 2 lines. So when you count, do so until you count 6 defined stripes for each of those colors, and that's 12 rows. And then the additional row is the 13th. Probably the best advice I never received as a new crocheter was to count my stitches every row. I'm sure even if I did hear that advice on my first project, I probably wouldn't have listened. It seems like a lot of really boring work to count 75 stitches at the end of every row. I get it, but hear me out. Ripping out several rows when you realize the edges are either getting bigger or getting smaller and they're uneven, well, that's a bigger waste of time than counting your stitches at the end of every row. You won't have to do this forever, but for the first several rows, you'll want to count every stitch until you get the hang of where that first stitch and where the last stitch is. And once you get the hang of it, just count every 2 or 3 or 4 rows, and eventually, as you continue to crochet and you finish more projects, you won't really even need to count your stitches anymore. So if you're working with the same yarn as me, you'll run out of yarn before you finish the 13 rows. When this happens, it's pretty easy to add more yarn to a project. Insert your hook through the next stitch, yarn over, pull up a loop, and leave it there. Then grab your new yarn, fold it over, leaving another 6" or so tail, place that on your hook, and pull it through both loops. Now that finishes the stitch, and it also adds the new yarn to the project. But before you keep going, you'll want to flip it over and tie the 2 ends together to secure the join. Now a little time saver is to work over these tails so you don't have to weave them in later. Just make sure they're laying on top of the work when you make your next several single crochets, and they'll catch in the stitches. Then just trim the little bits and you're good to go. While we're finishing up the last few rows here in color A, I want to mention a resource I think you'll find really helpful since you're brand new to crochet. My complete beginner's guide to crochet will give you a more comprehensive learning experience than what you're finding with this project tutorial. In that guide, I'll walk you through everything you need to know as a beginner and nothing you don't. You'll see tips for choosing the right hook, the right yarn, and a few other tools you'll want to have on hand as you continue with your journey. And you'll find several short and to the point tutorials for the techniques and stitches you need to learn first. Then to wrap it up, I'll recommend some more beginner-friendly full project tutorials I already have available for you to dive in and practice what you've learned. Oh, and it's completely free. Just visit bhooked.com/howtocrochet or click the link on your screen here or in the description box below to get started. Okay, when you have 13 rows completed in color A, your blanket will look something like this. Insert your hook through the last stitch and leave it just like before when we added more yarn, doing the same technique. Then fold over color B, place it on the hook, and pull through. You can go ahead and cut color A now, and then tie the two ends together to secure them. Then chain 1, turn your work, find the first stitch, and single crochet there. Now this time we won't work over the tails since they're on the edge. You can technically like this, but it doesn't look quite as clean, so I'll show you how to weave those in later. And that's as complicated as this pattern gets. With the techniques you just learned, continue working in color B until you have 13 rows. Then switch back to color A, work 13 rows, switch to color B, work 13 rows, and maybe while you're working on that, you can check the tutorials in that beginner crochet guide, eh? So there's a total of 9 stripes in this blanket, 5 of which are worked in color A, and 4 are worked in color B. I think you'll be surprised by how fast this blanket grows. It won't be long and you'll be able to stay warm under it while you work. That is, if your cute little cat will let you flip it when you finish a row. Thank you, Paisley. And although you may not be a fast crocheter now, don't let that keep you from finishing this project. Even if it takes you months to make, that's still a really great accomplishment. Speed will come with time and practice, and honestly, you'll get a lot of that with this blanket if you can power through and finish it. When you finish the last stripe in color A, the last thing you need to do is fasten off. You'll trim the yarn and pull that tail through the loop on your hook. Then with a yarn needle, weave that tail in. I like to go back and forth a couple times as much as I can with the tail length I have, and that really helps the end to stay put and not work itself back out later. Then don't forget to trim any bits from where you worked over the tails and all those stripe edge ends. The biggest tip here is to weave them in along the right color, and you'll do so just like you saw before. That's all for now, friend. I'm so glad you decided to give this project a try and let me be a part of your crochet journey. I love teaching others how to crochet because I believe yarn can do more for you than just make a pretty thing. I know it certainly has for me. I'd love nothing more to keep inspiring you to make something that makes you happy, so if you liked this tutorial and you liked my teaching style, hit the subscribe button so I can see you back for the next one. Also, don't forget to check the description box for a link to the pattern for this project, as well as that free beginner crochet guide. I think it'll really help. Happy hooking, and I'll see you in the next one.